And now it's my pleasure to, אפשר לעבור לעברית להקדמה, לקרוא לברק הירשברג, שהוא בוגר תוכנית אדמס. אשמח לספר לכם על החוויות שלו מהניסיון שלו, ואולי הייתי מגדיר את זה בתור מה כדאי לעשות ואולי גם מה לא כדאי לעשות.
נדבר גם על זה. So my name is Barak, I'm from Tel Aviv University, and about a couple of months ago, Batsheva wrote to all of the alumni asking who's willing to speak with Adams Fellows, and I immediately said yes, because I like this program a lot. I've done so, spoke to individual fellows in the past when they were about to go to their postdocs, and I like doing it. And so I thought, why not? I'll come and speak to some of you who might be interested. And then an hour later, Batsheva said, perfect, the conference is on the 22nd, and you have 1 hour for your talk. And I was, wait a minute. I feel like, anyway, I got startled, but then I thought maybe it's not so scary, and I should try to put what I want to tell to people in slides and see how it works out. So this is the first time I'm giving this talk. So. Bear with me. And I've called it The Hitchhiker's Guide to an Academic Career with a question mark that was taken off later in the brochure. But it's an important question mark. How many of you know about the book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Raise your hand. Okay, everybody. I'm very happy about it because the book is rather old, and you're rather young. What's the answer the protagonist is looking for in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? The answer to what? Right, to life, universe, and everything else.
He's searching for the question.
He's searching for the answer. We'll get to that in a second. What's the answer? 42. And then the supercomputer, right, deep thought, not deep mind, tells it that maybe it should have asked for the question, right? Because the answer is meaningless without the question. So the reason I called it like this is there is no Hitchhiker's Guide to an Academic Career, right? There's no set of rules and a particular path that you can follow that will guarantee you'll have a successful academic career. Sorry to disappoint you. Everyone has their own way, and that's fine. So the best thing that I can do is I can tell you about my personal path and what I learned along the way. And the way I've structured this talk is I try to share with you the best advice I got along the way. So a very specific few advice I got along the way that helped me feel more secure in that process. And hopefully it will help some of you as well. So that's the way it's structured, and I would really love if this would be more of a conversation rather than a talk. I have 25 slides. We have almost an hour, so if you don't talk to me, we're going to be done early, but no one's going to be sad about that as well, right? Okay, so who am I? I'm an assistant professor at the School of Chemistry in Tel Aviv University. I'm married to Shiran. This is my wonderful daughter, Noga, 3.5 years old. I was born and raised here in Jerusalem, which is a city I love, so that's why I'm always happy to come back. Now I live in Ramat Gan, which is not as exciting. No, I'm kidding, it's fine. And I'm first generation to higher education, and I say to you guys, not for you to, be proud of me, but because if any of you are also first generation to higher education and go through this process thinking things that I thought about while I went through it, then just feel free to reach out to me and talk about that as well. Should you listen to me? So I will again go with a quote from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on this, and the quote goes like this. You know, said Arthur, it's at times like this when I'm trapped in a Vogon airlock with a man from Beetlejuice and about to die of asphyxiation in deep space, that I really wish I'd listened to what my mother told me when I was young. Why? What did she tell you? I don't know. I didn't listen, right? So whether you listen or not is up to you. Whether you should listen or not is also up to you, okay? What I want to say is, again, this presentation is me trying to share my insights on navigating my personal academic career, who, keep in mind, is still also rather short. I started at Tel Aviv 4 years ago, and the advice I received along the way. Your way might be different. I'm probably wrong. So with that being said, you take what you want from this. How did I get to where I am today? I started as an undergraduate at the Hebrew University in the Amerim Natural Sciences program, which was a wonderful program. The first time I got introduced into a program which is truly interdisciplinary, I think. Then I went away to the military for 6 years. I was on loan in Rafael as a chemist and as a physicist. I did my master's while I was there. And then I came back from the military service, and I joined graduate school with the same group I worked at as an undergraduate at the Hebrew University, and I was an Adams Fellow. That was the second time I got introduced to a really multidisciplinary program, and I think it really helped me shape the kind of science that I like to do today. Then I finished in 2018, went on a postdoc in Zurich at ETH, working with Michele Parrinello. I was a Rothschild fellow there, and then I came back in 2021 to be a faculty at Tel Aviv University. And I've been there ever since, 4 years now, celebrating 4 years done, more or less today, in January. And this is how I've structured the talk. I have a lot to say also about undergraduate. I have a lot to say about everything, so if you don't stop me, I'll keep going. But about undergraduate and about my military service, and how that helped me, but I started from what is relevant to you guys. So I started with graduate school, and the best advice I got in graduate school, the best advice I got when I was searching for a postdoc, including some of you asked to see what was an email like when I was applying for postdoc positions, so we'll do that as well. Advice I got on how to be a successful postdoc, hopefully I was, and then advice on how to secure a faculty position, and how to succeed as faculty. And again, there will be a Q&A session in the end, but if you please help me out, and let's try to do this more as a conversation. So let's start with graduate school. When I finished my undergrad, I did my Amirim. In Amirim, you have to do a thesis at the Hebrew University. You have to take the last 2 years of my undergrad. I did a project in a lab doing research, and you write a thesis in the end of your undergraduate. And when I joined the military, I wrote a paper about that. It took me a couple of years. I went to officer's course, but then I came back and I wrote the first paper on it. And while I was in the military, I did my master's. I wrote another paper with my supervisor, and I even wrote a paper as part of my military service. So I had 3 papers when I finished my military service. And I came back to do my PhD with these 3 papers, and I sat down and had a conversation with my mentor and told him very naively, right, as a young student, I have 3 papers, the compilation thesis is 3 papers, what are we waiting for, right? I should probably graduate rather soon. And he was kind enough not to berate me, and he told me that that's great, and I did some nice work, and he's proud of me, but that the PhD is not just about publishing papers, but it's about learning broadly and becoming a mature scientist. That's as important as writing good papers, okay? And back then, I didn't understand it, but 3 years later, when I finished my PhD, I completely saw his point. He was totally right. It happened more than once during our PhD. Every time he said something, I couldn't understand it, but in the end, he was totally right. It's not a cliche. We all know you need to publish good papers to be competitive. All of you have probably already done that, okay? But you need to take this time also to prioritize learning broadly, okay? I don't mean, go wander off into Buddhism if you're studying, genetics. You could do that as well. It's also a good time to do that. But what I mean is, I was a theoretical chemist. I knew one part. I am a theoretical chemist. I knew one type of calculations. I've contributed something doing them, and I thought I was done. But had I left for my postdoc at that point, I would have come completely unprepared. So you need to learn broadly within your field, try to learn several tools, try to learn what are the tools that are available, what challenges they have, what you can and cannot do with them, even if you don't contribute to them as part of your research, right? So you need to be broadly aware of what is out there and what the challenges are. Because then when you'll see when you go to apply for a postdoc, that information will be invaluable. Okay? So that's the first advice I got. This one was from my PhD mentor. You need to learn beyond publications. The second thing I learned was that...
concretely.
Yes.
How do you do that?
How did I do it? So for me, I really learned one type of calculations and applied it to a particular family of molecules, let's say, when I was an undergraduate before and a master's student. It's called electronic structure calculations, and I didn't know. I saw friends around me do other sorts of simulations, molecular dynamics and classical mechanics and quantum mechanics, and I asked my supervisor to have projects that will also teach me those techniques. And I knew that it would cost me a little by spreading out, but in the end, it was totally worth it, right? So I personally took on a couple more projects in different fields. Not in different fields, in the same field using different techniques, okay? But it happened by talking to people, by going to conferences, by talking to other students. I'll get to that in a second. But the best thing you can do is talk to your supervisor. Ask him, what am I missing in the field? They have the broad perspective. What do you think I should learn more? What method haven't I learned so far? What are the challenges of that method? Have this discussion with him.
And if you have a good project, it's tempting to just to milk some more.
Do it. I'm not saying don't do it. You have to do it. This is what I mean by you have to do it to be competitive. But don't jump too quickly into this, to looking through a small hole. Try to look broadly, right? Because that's one of the things you need to develop to become good faculty, to be able to look broadly at your field and not just at the particular kind of calculations or experiments that you're doing, okay? So I would say the first thing to do, talk to your supervisor. Tell them, is there anything I need to know that I'm not learning? I'll continue working hard on my project, but what else do you recommend? Talk to him, talk to other mentors, talk to other students, which I'll get to that later. And maybe even pick up a project in one of those. I picked up a project towards the end of my PhD. For example, I did applications. I took methods that were existing and applied them to chemical systems to answer chemical problems. And at some point, I felt like a lot of people around me in theoretical chemistry were developing the computational tools. And I didn't do much of it. And so at some point, I actively took a project in developing a new computational tool because I needed to know if I could do it and how hard it would be and what are the skills I need to do it. And I ended up doing very much method development in my postdoc. Was almost to the other extreme, okay?
You led it, like first author work?
Yes, yeah. I started on working with someone on their project, and then I went on and wrote another paper on my own, yeah. And he was right. I ended up staying 3 years after that conversation, yeah? He was absolutely right. If you don't graduate too quickly, not just because it's good for them, right? He didn't say it out of that. Yeah, actually, what he said is, if you insist, I'll let you graduate. But I think it's a mistake. So for you a PhD is still a good time to mature and become a scientist that looks broadly at the field. Okay, more questions? Good. Another thing I think, we didn't discuss about all these things back then, but he did do extremely well, is he taught me how to convey a message. I think this is the time to learn how to convey a message. You can be an extremely successful, smart, wonderful scientist, but if people don't get what you're doing, then you might still succeed, right? If you're a brilliant genius, no one understands. But it would be easier for you if people really understand what you did, what was the problem you tackled, how you overcome it, and why it's important, okay?
The elevator speech?
Elevator speech is great, yeah. It's great. I think it's a good skill, right? And it's hard. You have to practice it, right? We have a tendency to go into the technicalities because that's what we know. But if we can explain it easily, we get a lot from it, right? Sometimes people. So what do I mean by it? So 3 things. You need to learn how to write good, concise, impactful research papers, and I'll tell you how he did that, how he taught me how to do it. You need to learn how to present, okay? And you need to learn, I think, how to teach, okay? So how did I learn how to write papers? The way I did first is because in the first papers, he worked really closely on them with me. We sat and I tried to see how he thinks about writing papers, my supervisor. And then we would write, headlines together, we would write bullet points together, and I would elaborate on them. We worked closely a lot on all of the first papers. And then at some point, later in my PhD, I thought I was a big boy now, and I'll write this paper about the method that I was developing, the new skill I wanted to learn, on my own, and I'll give him a full draft, and that will be wonderful, right? I'll show that I've learned something. And I've written the full draft, and I remember this day, I went to his office, I let him read it, he read it, he came back to me, and he said that he would have written it completely differently, and he doesn't like it. And instead of being offended, I took it, I threw it away, and I started from scratch, because I really wanted to be able to learn from that procedure, okay? Yeah?
You asked him what did you think is the problem?
Oh, of course. With him, you got all of the feedback very clearly. This I couldn't have done on my own. He taught me how to do it without, addressing it as that's what he was doing. He simply wrote the papers with me. And when I gave him a draft that I wrote, he told me what he thought was wrong with it. Okay. And then I decided to start from scratch, right, after I figured out what I have done wrong. Because I didn't write that sort of paper until then. Right? So learn how to write. It will be worth your time. And if your supervisor doesn't actively teach you how he thinks about writing paper, ask them. Ask them to tell you. Talk to them about it, okay? It's a skill that you won't regret acquiring, okay? Then presenting. So practice giving presentations at conferences and seminars. So again, what I like to say about my PhD supervisor, he was, at some point in my PhD, he retired. He became emeritus, okay? And still, whenever he went to present at a conference, he would sit down his group and practice his talk. It was the same talk we've heard a month before, or similar to it, when he went to another conference, but every time he would give a talk, which would be, you know, in the double digits probably every year, or close to it, he sat all of us down and went over his talk. And he wanted to hear our feedback from them, okay? So he practiced his talk even though he was 70 and extremely good at giving talks, okay? So don't be shy to do it yourself. And if you need to sit down with your group members or with your supervisor and ask them to help you out, do it, okay? If you need to give a talk and you always get to them without practicing them, start practicing them, okay? And get their feedback, okay? If they're too busy or unwilling, find your friends who will help you, okay? More senior postdocs, something like that. It's a skill, again, you won't regret having. And the third is teaching. I grew up at the Hebrew University. I now work at Tel Aviv University. Teaching is part of what every faculty does and also part of what most students do, right? And I think teaching takes time from research. It's true, right? And a lot of people then don't like teaching so much because they want to write papers, they want to do science. But I think that if you get good at it now, you'll be good at it as a faculty, and it's a skill that it will be much harder to learn later. So that's my advice too, and will be a big part of your career. Even if you go to the Weizmann Institute of Science, they say they don't teach, but they do teach. That's the truth. They can choose how much they want to teach. That's the difference, I think. This is being recorded. I'm putting myself into a hole. Anyway, the last thing I want to say about graduate school is that it takes a village, okay? And I don't mean this, again, it's not a cliche. These guys are the people I sat in the office with. One of them is sitting over there, Liel. We also were Adams Fellows, more or less at the same time. And out of all of the 5, 4 of them are faculty members now in universities in Israel, and the 50 is in a really good place in industry. And I'm showing this because at the Fritz Haber Center, where I did my PhD at the Hebrew University, there's a lot of computational chemistry groups, and a decision was made at the center that the students are all mixed. You don't sit only with your group, okay? So all of us worked with different mentors, okay? Except these 2 guys, they worked with the same mentor. But all 3 of us worked with 3 other mentors other than theirs. And that was amazing, right? Because this is what I meant about expanding, learning broadly, right? Just by talking to them, realizing that what they do exists is something that was made very easy for us, okay? Arguing about our problems with people from different perspectives. It really taught me a lot, okay? And it will help you grow. So talk to students from your own group and postdocs from your own group, but also from other groups. You will really learn from them. And some of them will be your friends and colleagues for the rest of your career, like my friends here. The second thing is that you should seek out mentors. And what do I mean by it? When I was applying for faculty positions, I spoke to my mentor, of course, my PhD supervisor, but I spoke over Zoom from Switzerland when I had to decide, or when I was thinking about what to present in my research proposal. I spoke to all of their supervisors as well. I never wrote a paper with most of them, except one of them. I didn't write a paper with them. I wasn't their student. I didn't work with them. They taught me courses when I was an undergraduate and graduate. But we spoke a lot along the years, and I felt comfortable enough to ask for their advice. And every one of them had a different perspective. And the advice I will show you came from my PhD supervisor and from them. I won't show you all advice from my personal supervisors. I'll show you advice for the mentors that I acquired along the way. And it really made a difference, okay? So if you can, do that as well. Talk to your teachers. They don't think that it's annoying. They don't think that you're wasting your time. They like to see good students and help them in their dilemmas, in the forks in the road, okay? So don't be shy to do it. I think I was never turned away by a mentor when I wanted to ask for their advice. Never. Okay, so that's for graduate school. If you have any questions, then I'm happy to take them. Now for postdoc. When you finish graduate school soon, more so than for some than others, you will apply for a postdoc. And again, the best advice I got when I applied for a postdoc was not, this one was not from my PhD mentor, it was one of my friends' PhD mentors. He told me, there's only one thing you need to know about what you need to do in your postdoc. And I said, what is it? I mean, tell me. And he said, you have to learn something new that we don't know how to do and come back to Israel and teach us how to do it. That's it. That's all you need to do. If you do that, and it's an important technique that will help us solve an important problem, that's it, you're done. And it was, I think he's right, you know. Of course, there's a lot of things to play around with, but I think that should be your goal, okay? Yeah, you had a question? All I'm saying is that if you learn new techniques, bring fresh perspectives and skills to your community in Israel, it's really, really what's important. To solve important problems, of course, not just learning fancy techniques that don't solve important problems. And so choose a postdoc that exposes you to new methods, technologies, or fields, and prioritize it, I think, over fancy schools or famous mentors. I think it's more important, okay? Of course, it helps if you can do this also with a fancy school or famous mentor, but I think this is that much more important. Yeah?
So maybe on that point. It's something that I hear from many faculty, that it's more important to have a good postdoc, like someone that fits you, than prioritizing going to Ivy Leagues or something like that. But then the question is, when you try to apply for a position afterwards, how much do you feel like this is something that could harm you if you go to, let's say, a lower ranked school? Let's say compare the same postdocs, same achievements throughout postdoc. How much do you feel like is going to be factored into the actual school that you go to?
So I don't know to answer, definitely, but I can tell you I thought about it, right? I went to Switzerland, right? At that time, not many theoretical chemists went to Europe, right? Wasn't that long ago. Most theoretical chemists went to the US. The community in Israel was mostly American educated, So when I started my PhD and I was a rude young student, I told my advisor that I want him to help me get into Berkeley for my postdoc. By the time I applied for postdoc positions, the people I was most excited to work with were in Switzerland. And so I was thinking, but maybe I'm making a mistake, right? I'm going into a different community. None of that mattered. None of that mattered. The first thing they're going to ask you is what you did. What was the hard problem you attacked? What were your achievements? How you did it? And what will you bring back here and try to solve? That's the number one thing everywhere, I think, everywhere. Of course, in the end, you're going to need to have good letters from your community and so on, but I think that can be done in a very long list of institutions. So in the end, I went to a really famous guy in ETH Zurich, right? But I went to him because of him. I mean, I was contemplating it. I went to meet him, and I spoke to him. And I spoke to him for an hour. That's it. I went for my money to visit his lab, and I met him for an hour, and when I came out from that meeting, I knew that I had to go to learn from him. Because he looked at things in a totally different way than how I looked at things. And that convinced me. That's what the best advice I got, right? I knew that if I will learn his perspective, I will be a better scientist. It helped that he was also at ETH and very famous. But that's not why I went to him, and I think that's what you should prioritize. Okay. But it's okay to start searching by looking at all the nice departments that you've heard of and seeing whether someone fits there, okay? But then challenge yourself and also think about the person and the topic you want to work on, okay? I think it's more important.
I have a question.
Yes?
Do you think you can go too far when learning something new and the faculty you're going to apply to wouldn't know to appreciate the method? Like for me, I'm somewhere between computer science and medicine. I have thoughts about doing a postdoc that is like completely wet work.
Yeah.
But I would want a position in computer science.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll think that I'm not suited for this faculty anymore.
Yeah. So the best thing I can tell you is that trying to plan ahead where you'll end up is a lost cause. Honestly, what you should plan is what you want to do. I'll get to more of that advice in a second. But you need to think about what you want to do and go there with open eyes. So if you switch fields from theoretical computer science to, wet lab biology, it's not going to be done in 2 years, right? Because the people who came from wet lab biology go under postdoc in wet lab, it takes 5-6 years. It's going to take you probably longer. So as long as you go with open eyes and you believe in your way and you succeed in what you set out to do, I think it will be fine. But also keep an open mind on where you might end up in the end, okay? I went to do my postdoc with a guy who's much more a physicist than a chemist, okay? And I worked on something that was much more physics than chemistry. And I was worried that when I come back, the physicist will tell me that I'm not a physicist, and the chemist will tell me that, I'm not a chemist anymore. And some departments did. Some departments did, right? But other departments didn't. And I'll get to that in a second, okay? So go do what you want to do. Don't compromise on the science that you want to do because you're afraid of that price. But also don't expect not to pay the price that is needed to do it, okay? That's my personal opinion. And also, I personally think that science is really multidisciplinary today, and a lot of these divisions are made up by now. So I see departments that are more open to that and departments that are less open to that. So maybe you will need a department that is more open to that. Find that one for you. Okay. The second thing is, other than learn something new and bring it back, is that you have to find a supportive mentor. Okay? And what do I mean by supportive mentor? You have to do first-class science. We agree. Okay? But this talk is also more about the softer skills and the softer recommendations. And a good mentor, I think, is almost as important as a good research topic. I think, to me, it's much more important than prestige, okay? Because you have to do first-class science, but you also need someone who will write a letter for you, a really good letter for you. What does it mean? He needs to say what you've done, how much of it was your ideas, what did you bring to his lab, how do you do in comparison to his other former postdocs, okay? And if he doesn't do his job in writing a good letter, it's going to be hard, okay? As long as you succeeded, right? He needs to support you. He needs to read your research proposal, give you advice, or at least, if they're very busy people, show you by example how they run their lab for you to learn from them. So I think it's similarly as important. So this is very hard to know in advance, extremely hard to know in advance. So try to talk to former postdocs and former students in the lab. Try to look at how many of them ended up as faculty members in other places, and that will give you a hint. But this is really something that's hard to assess in advance, but try, okay? If you know someone, don't be shy. If you know someone who went to do a postdoc there 10 years ago and they're now professors somewhere, write to them. Ask them whether you can chat with them for 10 minutes about their experience there. I think everybody will say yes. And the other advice I have is start early and apply broadly, okay? I was really nervous about it, and I started a year in advance. In fact, I think I agreed to go to the postdoc a year in advance. And then I was sort of like, what do I do now? There's a whole year. So I say start 6 months to a year in advance. Don't expect to start 3 months in advance and finding a place and moving across the globe in 3 months, okay? And I think apply to about 10 places. Everyone has their number. I applied to about 10 places. And the reason I applied to 10 places is because I also wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to read about people and talk about people who did things that I wasn't as familiar with and see whether that would be a good option for me, okay? So try to challenge yourself to expand your horizons and where you want to do your postdoc. And in that time that you have left, keep applying for fellowships. Some of you ask what fellowships to apply to. So there's a long list. You'll all hear about them. Rothschild, Fulbright, Human Frontiers, Marie Curie, Schmidt Fellows. There's institution-specific if you're going to Switzerland. There's the Swiss government fellowships. To MIT, they have their own institution-specifics. So just apply everywhere, okay? That's what I have to tell you. The reason I say it is that it takes probably, some people get a lot, but sometimes it takes more than once to get a fellowship, and that's fine, yeah.
Do you have specific advice on applying to these fellowships? Like what should I emphasize?
So on that part I don't know because I haven't yet been on the other side that judges the people for those fellowships. I can tell you that I applied to everything that was relevant. That means I applied to the Rothschild first and then to the Swiss government. I wrote a research proposal, and when I came to the Rothschild interviews, the research proposal was something I wrote, 6 months before that, and I came to the interview, and they asked me, so tell us about your research proposal, and I asked them whether they want, should I tell you about what I wrote or what I really plan on doing today, what I'm thinking about now. And they said, only about what you're thinking now. And so I told them what I thought then. So what I wrote ended up being completely, in the actual Rothschild fellowship, ended up not being what I told them in the interview. And it was fine. So again, the best thing I can tell you is that if you propose a good idea, I think in your research proposal, I think it helps, but in that part, I don't know. I don't know how the decision making is done there, okay? I can tell you one other thing, though. I can tell you that it's all extremely, extremely competitive. Extremely. It's really hard to get, and a lot of fantastic people end up not getting it, okay? And the reason I say it is that we sometimes, especially even if we got the Adams Fellowship, right, if we get rejected by some postdoc fellowships, we take it personally. Don't take it personally. Many more people who are excellent and should have gotten these don't get them. I think maybe the more senior people will tell if they agree with me or not. But I think that's the situation. And for example, I say proudly, I got the Rothschild Fellowship from the waiting list after the ceremony happened. So I didn't even go to my ceremony. On the last day, someone could cancel the Rothschild Fellowship. I got a call from Natanya, and she told me I won. And so there's more than one way to succeed in it, and if the cutoff is extremely arbitrary, so don't take it too hard. If the first one you don't get, and the second one you don't get, and then the third one you do get. The same thing happened with the Swiss government, and I didn't end up getting it from the waiting list. Yeah.
Sorry, just to make your point even stronger, the Rothschild people actually do stats on their applicants, and they say that the people who actually reach the committee stage, the later success in academic career,
there's no difference.
There's no difference.
I heard about it. Yes, you're right.
Did not get the Rothschild.
Yeah. So don't take it too hard. You know, it's like I'll get to it later. This thing is full of rejection. So if you end up getting it, wonderful. If you end up getting rejected, you don't know if you were number 13, like I was. I would have never known, right? I would have. So that's all I'm saying. I like to say that because no one talks about failures. And I got on the very last day, the ceremony had happened, right? And by the way, I had to give it up as well, the money, because I went to Switzerland, and you couldn't take it while going to Switzerland back then, because the minimum wage for a postdoc in Switzerland is higher than the maximum allowed pay of the Rothschild Fellowship. So I had to give it up, and the next person got it, which was wonderful, right? So, okay. So how do you apply for a postdoc? This is an example letter. What did I try to do? I opened the emails I wrote to my postdoc supervisor, and instead of posting the whole thing here, I took only the good sentences, because there were also really bad sentences that I would have never write today. So I took the good stuff and I put it here, okay? I think here are the 4 things that first, the email should be short, okay? It should be, I think, short. People don't have the time spent to read scrolls. But it should be concise and focused on what you need to say. What do you need to say? Yes.
Will we get this?
If you want, I can send it to you. It's not a problem. Yeah. But like I said, it's open source license. It is provided without guarantee and with a giant warning on it and so on. And over lunch, you can talk to other people and hear their perspective, and not everyone will agree with what I have to say. I say it confidently, but I'm equally confident that other people will disagree with at least some of what I have to say. That's what I want to tell you, okay? But this is my perspective, okay? So what did I do? This is sentences from my email to my postdoc, maybe a little slightly modified. Who am I? What do I want to do? So I'm a PhD student at the Hebrew University working in the group of Benny Gerber. I'm writing to inquire about the possibility of joining your group as a postdoc in September 18. That's it. They read the first sentence, they know who I am and what I want to achieve. If they can't hire postdocs, they might not answer, okay? If it's not relevant in September, they might answer, that's great, but I don't have the money now, so maybe we'll talk in 6 months. I don't know, okay? What is my key achievement? This is important because here we sometimes fall into saying very broad things. I did my PhD in theoretical chemistry. So what? What did you do? What did you learn? What did you achieve? 2 sentences. This is what I mean about learning how to convey a message, okay? If you can do these 2 sentences right, they will know if what you did is interesting, important in their view, and whether they want to hire you or not. It helps, okay? If you say something broadly, then they're left with no strong feeling at all. Okay, so what did I write? I wrote in my PhD, I predicted, this is technical, so it doesn't matter if you understand the details or not. I would just want to convey the feeling. I predicted computationally the existence of the first solid molecular allotrope of nitrogen composed of N8 molecules, which we published in Nature Chemistry, and I attached below for your convenience. And I added the paper for them to look at. If this sentence got their attention, then they might look at the paper and read the abstract, okay? And then maybe add a secondary achievement. Okay, because, for example, I added one because I knew that he was less interested in applications, even though they were nice. He wanted people who could also do method development. I knew that if I don't show that I know how to do that, he might think I'm not relevant for his group. So my second sentence was about that project that I did, which included computational method development. So I did two sentences here. then why do I want to work with you? Before I wrote to someone for a postdoc, I actively read their papers from recent years and tried to see whether some of it is interesting to me. And specifically, he published a paper in PRL, an excellent physics journal, about a method called variationally enhanced sampling. So I told him that I read your work on variationally enhanced sampling. I found it exciting. I would like to learn this technique from you, and I would like to contribute to its development. This is really what I wanted to do. I didn't do it eventually. That's not what I did with him. But that's what I wanted to do when I wrote the email. And I'm open to, so this is why this is important. I'm open to discussing other ideas according to current research interests. The reason is not because you're trying to jump through hoops and be likable, but because you really want to be open-minded to what they're interested in working on. Maybe they've moved since. Maybe they have a really cool new result you don't know that is just in review somewhere and they want you to continue that project. So be open to hear from them as well. You don't have to compromise, but be receptive to what they're interested in. And what are my future career plans? I think it's important. Maybe you don't have a lot of times when we're PhD students and postdocs, we have a hard time saying these things, right? But you should get comfortable with it. At least I did. So it was hard for me, but I tried to get comfortable with it. My long-term goal is to pursue faculty position in Israeli universities, and I think working with them will help me develop the tools I need to achieve this goal. And importantly, I attached my CV and names of possible referees who I asked in advance whether they're willing to be contacted and write a letter for me. And I put their names in the CV. And I also offered to ask them to send the letters directly if they want, because if you lower the barrier for them, then the higher the chances that they will actually get the letters, okay? Yes?
You shouldn't add the funding that you will bring with you? Or
When I applied, I didn't have funding. I didn't have funding. I might have told them after I saw it was interesting, I might have told them that we should, so they will reply, or not reply, but if they reply, they will say whether they have the funding, don't have the funding, whether they want to interview, and so on. And then you start discussing whether you need to apply for fellowships or not. You can add a sentence about it now, but I think right now, for me, but that's not a big deal. You can add a sentence or not. That's my example letter, and I think it was fine. And then the second best advice I got, yes?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What was approximately the success rate of getting the reply, and what did you do when you not get the reply?
No, I got quite a lot of replies. I have to admit. There were a few people who never answered at Berkeley, and I was sad. But I got quite a lot of replies. I don't think when you write a good email, there's no reason for anyone to really ignore it because you made it easy for them to respond. Some of them replied and said, I'm sorry, I don't have the funding, I can't, or just I can't offer you a postdoc position in my lab. A lot of them did, right? I said I wrote to 10 people. In the end, I was serious in talking to 3, let's say, and then I actually got an offer and took an offer from 1. So, but I think most of them responded. When you make it easy for them, why wouldn't they? They don't, so this is again something I want to tell you. We sometimes imagine that why would they answer us? But Israeli graduate students are phenomenal. I will die on that hill, right? The best Israeli graduate students are as good as the best students in the world. I don't care if I'm being recorded. And therefore, even for famous postdoc advisors in famous institutions, they would want to hire excellent graduate students from Israel, okay? If they know what they're talking about. I really feel that. I think that's seriously the case. So don't be shy. They have, not all of their postdocs will be as good as you guys, so they have all the interest of answering you. I truly believe it, okay? And you should know that, okay? Yeah?
Can you envision a post-October 7 massacre?
So I don't know. I don't know. I went in 2018. I'm sure there exists people who wouldn't want to respond to you just because you're from Israel. That might be the case. I had 7 conferences that I went to last year. I was very worried about them. Every time I'd give a talk, whether people treat me differently and so on. So far in the sciences, I wasn't treated differently at all in my community. So I hope that will be the case for you. If something else happens, you wouldn't know because they wouldn't respond. The likelihood that someone would respond very negatively, I think, is close to 0. Might happen, but so I don't think you should worry about it. That's out of your hands. Yes? Yeah.
Do you think it's important to have a specific goal
I didn't end up doing it, right? So I had something that I saw him doing that I really liked and wanted to learn and contribute to. It doesn't mean that's what you will do, but it creates a connection between the two of you. It shouldn't be fake. It should be genuine, okay? But otherwise, how will you decide who to write to? So again, you can decide based on where they're at, what's the department. That's a possible strategy to start with. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. Also, when I compiled my list, I started with looking at the departments in the fanciest schools, okay? I did that. But then I looked at what they did and tried to see whether that's what I want to do. So you have a job. Before you write that letter, you have a lot of work to do. You need to read their papers. That's what I think, okay?
Yeah, but I mean, there are some people who, let's say, would want to work with, and I know their papers, they know what they're doing, but not like they have very broad interests, and I have relatively broad interests, and there is large intersections.
You don't commit to anything here. Do you have one of those things that you feel like you might want to learn and do? Mention that. If you have two, you can mention two. But if you don't mention anything, then it's a little vague. It might be fine, but I'm saying it will be better if you create a genuine connection. If you have a genuine need, a genuine topic that you're interested in that they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I say that also, like I've seen from my advisors, for instance, that if you don't have this part, then it's like Rashimat Futsal.
Yeah.
It looks like that you sent the same email to 50 different advisors, and then they will feel comfortable not answering.
That's also true. So we get a lot of emails from people who just send their, you'll become a faculty in theoretical chemistry and you'll get emails saying, I did my PhD here and here, and I excelled at organic synthesis. That's wonderful. I don't know much about organic synthesis. Why are you writing to me? And then you realize it's like broadly applied to people they don't really know. That's an extreme I think no one here will do, right? Everyone understands it's bad. But even creating a genuine connection is better. So I think even if you're not far off, creating a genuine connection increases the chances of them answering. Okay, wow, we have 10 more minutes. But this is great. If we don't reach the end, we don't reach the end. Fine, did I answer the question? Okay, good. This is a great advice I got. So I contemplated where I wanted to go. I was a little scared to go to my postdoc supervisor because he was, in the end, I really wanted to go. I wanted to learn his perspective, but he is a very famous guy. And he had an army of tens of postdocs who are themselves now National Academy of Sciences members. He's former postdocs, okay? And I was terrified. I thought, how do you go into this group and you make an impact so that they will remember you or they will say in a letter that this impact has been meaningful to them, right? I was terrified. But I really wanted to go. And this is, in the end, was the decision I was contemplating. And then I sat with another mentor of one of my friends, not my PhD supervisor, in this particular advice. And he said, but if you want to go there, go. If it doesn't work after 1 year, go to someone else. What's the big deal? I mean, if you really like their advice, you want to go there, after 1 year, reassess. You will know by then if it's a good fit for you or not. Now, you can do this 10 times, okay? But you also can't not do it at all, right? It's okay to switch after 1 year. No one will care or remember if your postdoc took 3, 4, or 5 years. No one cares, okay? No one cares, and they will only remember if you did excellent science. So choose an important problem, but I say this also during the PhD, but also it's fine to do a little bit of risk management. It's fine. After 1 year. If it really doesn't work, go somewhere else. And that advice, an hour later, I went and wrote to him that I would like to come and I accept his offer. It really made it easy for me, okay? What's the worst thing that could happen? We have this vision that we can't fail. The postdoc is such a short time. We have to succeed. It's true. But if it takes one more year longer because the first thing wasn't a match, that's totally fine. I don't think it will hurt you in any way. Yes?
To tell us, but no one will care besides your family.
No, I know. Yes, this is the second. I know. This is the second slide. So you're right. Moving is hard. So, but usually you go to places. I was at ETH. If that hadn't worked, I would go maybe to another group at ETH. But I should also say honestly, I moved on a postdoc. I didn't say it. I moved on a postdoc with my wife. We didn't have a daughter back then. You can do the math, and so I wasn't so scared about that. Right? It was just the two. But my wife left a very nice job in Tel Aviv to go to Switzerland and had to find a new job. So it wasn't as easy as well. But you're right. And I think then you can search for other people within that same area without bothering your family too much. So you're right. The family circumstances might make this a little harder. But I'm saying this because I feel like we're all told we shouldn't fail ever at any point in life. In fact, if the first year doesn't go well, don't be afraid to go. That's all I'm saying. If you're sure this isn't the place for you, it's better to go somewhere else instead of trying to not to succeed in an environment that's not good for you. Yes?
It's okay. I want to maybe go back a little bit to this stage of deciding where to go in terms of what research field.
Yeah.
Because so I need to do it soon, and I'm always afraid that I love what I do in the research field that I'm in, but I met my wife and decided to marry her after being in several long-term relationships. I'm afraid that, like, if I will continue in this kind of research field, it will be out of comfort, and it's because I wasn't exposed to different fields in the same depth as my field. I didn't go to many conferences that are way outside of my field. So I was wondering whether you have any advice on kind of maybe how to choose like a theme if you're not sure that you want to continue in your research field, how to maybe expose yourself to other fields or stuff like that.
So I didn't switch from theoretical chemistry to organic chemistry, okay? I didn't do that much of a big jump. Some other people who usually come to these things can tell you better about it. People who were experimentalists who become theoreticians, people who were theoreticians and became experimentalists. I didn't do that much of a big shift, but I instead moved in theoretical chemistry to a different community. And there I can say that if that's the shift you're doing and you're afraid, then that's exactly what you should be doing. If you're not scared enough, then you're not learning something new, okay? You should be a little uncomfortable. But how to go to a totally different field, then I don't know. I think it's fine, but like I said before, you should expect for it to take longer, and you should expect for it to have a certain price in the end, in the sense that you might not come back to the same field that you started with, but go with it and try, seriously. But go with open eyes. I don't know, I really don't know how to tell you if you really switch from chemistry to full-on biology. I don't know. I haven't done. So in this sense, I don't know how big of a change you're planning. So maybe tell me about it in the break, and then I can tell you what I think about it. Okay, but don't be afraid to fail. If it doesn't work out for year one, you can go do a postdoc somewhere else and be extremely successful. No one will remember that you spent a year somewhere else that wasn't a good match for you. That's fine. It won't haunt you for the rest of your academic career. And applying for a postdoc, family matters, okay? I really believe it. I put it at the end because it's, again, one of those things that are highly personal, and I don't know how to give advice on them. And I was, in a sense, it was rather easy for me because we were just the two of us, and we didn't have kids yet. And my wife, for example, I considered several postdocs. One of them was in a bigger city in the US. And I asked my wife whether she wants me to go. She prefers that we'll go there because it would be easier for her to find a job there. She works in high tech. And she said, no, for the next 2 years, you do what you want. I'll figure it out. And indeed, she figured it out. What did it mean for us? We worked in ETH Zurich, but we sat in a campus in Lugano, not in Zurich. That's where the supercomputer is. And that's where our group was. So I got to live in Lugano in Switzerland. If you've ever been, it's a wonderful place to spend two years. But there's no job in high tech, nothing. It's not Zurich, it's not the big city. And so the first thing my wife did there, she planned ahead. She decided she's going to sign up for a master's degree. And the first year we got there, she did a master's degree. There was a program in English, and she liked it a lot. Somewhere throughout that year, she realized she was done with it. It was fine, but she got all she needed from it. She started looking for a job. She found good jobs only in Zurich. So what did we do? Again, we didn't have kids at the time, so it's easy for me to say, right? Now I have a daughter, I understand the differences. But we hired a small flat in Zurich, and she spent half of the week in Zurich, and I spent half of the week in Lugano, and I came to visit her in Zurich, and she came. So, like, the weekends we spent together, and half of the week we spent together in Lugano, and half of the week she spent in Zurich, and I would go there to visit her one of the 2 nights she would spend there. So we found a solution, okay? But my wife was very supportive, and it was easy for her, relatively easy for her to be supportive, but I'm extremely appreciative of that. It's completely not trivial. That's the solution we found. You find your own solution, but take that into consideration, because a miserable postdoc can't do good science. Okay, so don't be miserable. Don't be miserable. That's what I'm trying to say here. You shouldn't be miserable at any point along the way, but try to be creative and find solutions. And some people are afraid to go to countries where they don't speak English. Don't be afraid of it, I think, at all, because your research group is going to talk in English, I think, 100%. And I got to learn Italian. It turned out that the university had free language courses for postdocs. I got to learn Italian. I was reading books in Italian. By the end of it, I loved it. It was one of the best things I remember from that time, really. It was such a cool bonus to this whole period. So don't be afraid of it, but maybe it will be nice for you in the end.
This is a very relevant topic for the spouse, because if you are going to a country that is not English speaking, you will be in a group that speaks English.
That's right.
Your spouse will be stuck in an environment that doesn't speak
So she learned Italian with me before we went there. We took classes in the embassy, specifically. And once we got there, she got a master's in an English program. And then she moved to work in Zurich, and everybody spoke English. So she never learned Italian, but she found her way. But it was her way, and it was something she had to figure out, and was kind enough to let me make this choice. My personal opinion, had she said that she prefers the big city US version, I might have gone for it. I mean, I knew one thing. I'm not going anywhere without her. That was the one thing that I knew. Okay, so family matters. To be a successful postdoc, you have to learn how to ride your bikes without helper wheels, okay? The most important thing as a postdoc is that you have to become independent, because that's what's going to happen the second you're going to be faculty. The second you're going to be a faculty, you're going to be on your own, in a sense that everything good or bad is based on your decision, and you're running your group. Your department head isn't going to tell you how to run your group. The university president isn't going to tell you how to run your group. Your colleagues aren't going to tell you how to run your group. For better or worse, you're going to do it yourself. And so that's the time to learn how to become independent, take ownership of your projects, expect to have much less, I think, supervisor time than when you were a PhD student. Many of you are probably already rather independent. If a good postdoc is pushing on that button even more and becoming really independent. Because day one as a faculty, you are making the cause. I remember I had a conversation with my department head. I was wondering what to do about a certain topic and so on. She told me, Barak, no one's going to make up your mind. Whatever you do is yours, good or bad. So no one will, even if you want to switch now, use the startup money you got to do something completely different, that's your decision. No one will stop you. But also what happens with it is for you to deal with. So that's the time to get used to that feeling. So use your supervisor time effectively and learn from him how to run his group. Also from him. I learned a lot from my PhD supervisor in that sense, and a lot from my postdoc supervisor in that sense, and they were extremely different from one another. And the last thing I want to say, don't come to compete. There's going to be a lot of very, very talented people around. Don't come to compete, come to collaborate. I think that will end up being a better result. Collaborate with other group members, build your network, build your skills. Some of my friends from my postdoc are now faculty members in Europe, and it's just fun, okay, to continue meeting them in conferences, working with them, and talking to them. Yeah.
So how did you connect with your postdoc mentor? Did you go to like conferences and network, or?
I never met him before.
Do you have like useful tips for networks for shy people?
Yeah, well, it's hard for me to say because I'm not naturally very shy, but my wife is a total introvert, I'm a total extrovert, you know how it works, and I don't have tips on what to do if you're shy. All I can do is that again, the best thing I can say, okay, I'll move to this. This is the second thing you have to do as a postdoc. You have to present everywhere. My deal with my postdoc supervisor was, every time you apply for a talk and you get a talk in a conference, I'm paying for the trip. So that was the decision. You go, you give talks, and you can go to conferences. And I went to quite a lot, and because luckily I was selected to give topics, so do it. Once you have results, start applying, talk to them, ask to go to conferences. Don't wait for them to tell you, you have to go, okay? And the second thing is that you have to make connections. And I'll tell you the following story, and I think I might finish with this, although I wrote you an example letter of how to apply for faculty positions and so on and so forth, and how to build a research proposal, but maybe some other time. I went up, after the first year of a postdoc, we wrote a nice paper I was very proud of, and I was invited to a big conference, more than 300 people in Norway, by the way, in Tromsø, above the Arctic Circle. It was one of the coolest places I've ever been to. And of course, I wanted to go. And since I was invited, my advisor, of course, sent me and so on. And I was terrified because the paper was just published. I was very proud of it. But in the audience were everybody in the field, like one person who wrote the book, the actual book on the field that I have, on my shelf. And the other person who was a super famous physicist who wrote the most well-known review on the topic, 20 years ago, and still is a super brilliant person and terrifying, really. I was terrified. And I gave my talk, and the two of them asked the hardest questions, right? And I did my best to answer, and I felt like with one of them I answered well, and with the other I wasn't so great, and so on. And I went and talked to them afterwards. And one of them, I think, even approached me. And I was terrified, but they didn't think of me as they didn't know I was terrified. In fact, I told one of them I was terrified, and he said, oh, I'm sorry, maybe I should have asked my question then maybe a little more calmly. But they responded extremely well to talking to me. We argued a little, we discussed a little. I heard their point of view, I told them my point of view, and it ended up being a wonderful connection. One of them, in this discussion, told me that he liked, in the end, after asking all these questions, that he liked the work so much, he's going to put it in the next version of his book. And I thought, oh, okay, yeah, he's just saying that to be nice. American professors are very nice. And in the middle of COVID, a few months later, he started emailing me and said that he's putting it in the book. And then he really did put it in the second edition of his book, which I have now, that he signed in my shelf next to the book that I had when I was a postdoc. I'm telling you this because you shouldn't be afraid. When you're a postdoc, you have good results, you start succeeding, start a little bit to imagine yourself as their colleague, as not as their admirer, if they're very famous scientists in the field. And don't be afraid from it. Go and talk to them. You will learn from them. You'll end up realizing that they're nice people who like this interaction as well. So it didn't happen to me that I spoke to someone who was extremely famous and I ended up feeling, like a total loser in the end and regretting that I went to talk to them. No, I ended up with wonderful discussions and I was really happy to do it. So I hope this will be the same experience you guys will have. Okay, so I don't know what to say about the faculty positions. I've prepared so many slides, but I think we have to go to lunch. So if you want to know about how to build a compelling research program, we'll do it later. It's only 25, I promise. The last thing I want to say is what I think are misguided advice. So one thing, the famous quote, publish or perish. I think it's bad. You have to publish. That's clear, right? We all know that. But don't prioritize it over quality, and don't prioritize it over, as a graduate student, becoming a mature scientist. It's important. The second one is competition. Focus on collaboration rather than competition, okay? Look at the people around you. They're from different fields. Talk to them. Learn from them. Don't compete with them. 3, perfectionism. Don't be paralyzed by it. Not every paper you write has to be the paper that will get you your next job or the next award or the next fellowship, okay? Science moves in small steps, okay? Don't be paralyzed by the fact that you didn't solve the big problem you set out to solve, but you made a small step forward. Start by this small step forward. And the fourth, and I think is extremely important, that you can't fail. That's a total myth. You know why it's a total myth? Because every faculty member has grants that were rejected, has papers that got horrible reviews. Everyone, even the ones with all the awards and all the fellowships and all the money, okay? Everyone. They just don't talk about it as often as the successes. Science is full of rejections, all the time. I don't want to also put you down, right? You will succeed. There's great parts in it. But it's full of rejections, failures, and setbacks, and the important part is really persevere and keep at it if that's what you want, okay? And not get so much worried about it. That's it. The disclaimer, again, that's my way. Your way is probably different, and I'm probably wrong. And if you have any more questions, let's do it over lunch.